Our company, Katie and myself, we have a company called Threat Knowledge Group that works for various parts of USG, SOCOM, and the intelligence community. And we take it upon ourselves to publish unclassified reports on the latest trends on the jihadist threat to America. And just 2 days ago, we published our latest report. You should have a black and white copy in front of you. It's The Rising Threat, the Islamic State's Militarization of Children. Claire and my wife Katie, Claire is right there, I think, wrote the bulk of this report, so I'm going to allow Claire to actually talk about the findings of this very, very disturbing trend. But before I allow her to give you the specific details of our latest report, I want to share with you the macro reality of the ISIS threat domestically, because it is not well understood, and there are empirical data available for Americans to understand how serious it is and how November really has to be a national security election as well as a constitutionally driven one. So before Claire talks about the specific report, let me give you some data points. June 29th, 2014, the Islamic State was declared. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi from the Grand Mosque at Mosul declared the re-establishment of the caliphate. So that's just over 2 years ago. From that date, we have killed or arrested on U.S. territory 110 ISIS jihadists. Not 10, not 20, 110, the most recent being in Roanoke, Virginia. If you look at the site report, the site center's analysis, since June of this year, there has been a jihadi attack outside of Iraq and Syria, so outside of the war zone, every 84 hours. Not 84 days, every 84 hours. Let's bring it all back home. If you look, we published a report on who the jihadists are that we are intercepting in America. If you look at the 110 arrests or kills and break them down into what they were doing when they were caught, it is a very disturbing picture. Half of them, about 45%, are what the FBI calls travelers. Those people who have decided to become jihadis for ISIS, but wish to leave America to fight jihad in Syria or Iraq. So they're leaving our territory to work for Abu Bakr in the Middle East. 20% of them are middle management terrorists, the facilitators, the talent spotters, the recruiters, the people buying the plane ticket for that jihadi to go from America to Turkey and then walk across the border into Syria, which leaves 37% of the ISIS terrorists intercepted in America are individuals who have decided to become jihadis for Abu Bakr, but have decided that the best way they can serve the new caliphate is to kill Americans on U.S. soil. As a result of that very high percentage, we concluded one of our previous reports with the statement, a Paris-style mass casualty attack in America is not a question of if, it is a question of when. We published that 1 week before San Bernardino, and of course, since then we have had Orlando as well. That is the reality of the escalating jihadi threat. They're not on the ropes, and even if the president tells us that they are contained, the empirical data proves otherwise. I, unfortunately, am very rarely in D.C. on Wednesdays. I'm glad to be here for Frank, but I have to go teach a class in about 30 minutes, so I'm going to hand over the floor to the person who actually did most of the heavy lifting, and that's Claire Herzog, who'll talk about perhaps the most disturbing latest trend, and that's the systematic exploitation of minors, of children, by the Islamic State. Thank you. Thank you, Frank.
Hi, I'm Claire Herzog. I work for Sebastian at Threat Knowledge Group. Sorry for my slight tardiness. We're based out of McLean, so I'm used to easier parking. We've been working on this since late April, early May, and it was all sort of started with an ISIS video that we mentioned in the report that was released. It was a nasheed, or a song, a propaganda song they sing. And instead of the typical propaganda video, it featured children explicitly. And these children, as they're quoted throughout the report, discuss, or first are carrying AK-47s, are involved in training, and are discussing the revenge that they seek on the Crusaders. And so seeing them as the face and the voice of ISIS in this video launched our interest to begin studying this theme for the report. So the findings, which you can see sort of summarized on the first page, basically show that ISIS is actively exploiting children on and off the battlefield in order to gain the upper hand against stronger and better armed adversaries. And this new use of children presents a threat that we need to prepare for, not only because we risk overlooking children because we assume their innocence, but also we run the risk of moral injury and increased rates of PTSD if our soldiers have to face them on the battlefield. Now, the first example of the United States not understanding the threat of children is the argument that Syrian refugees aren't a threat to the United States because only 2% of the refugees are military-age males, while the rest are women, children, and the elderly. So that completely overlooks our data and is predicated on the assumption that children, as well as other groups, are invariably innocent. So just to, I know Sebastian went over some data points, but I think it's really important to just talk about the numbers of children. So in 2015 alone, ISIS recruited about 400 kids through targeting schools and mosques. They abducted between 800 and 900 between the ages of 9 and 15 by June 2015. Some experts have come up with a figure of 1,500 children in ISIS ranks. 89 children were eulogized in ISIS propaganda from January 2015 to 2016, and 12 child executioners and 1 child participating in a public execution have been featured in ISIS propaganda in the last 6 months. So not only are we seeing this huge prominence of children, but we're starting to understand how this is a huge propaganda win for ISIS. They're drawing global attention, which is obviously the goal of a lot of terrorist organizations, and that is increasing fear because they're bolstering their brutal tactics of public executions, burning the Jordanian pilot alive, etc., by featuring children in these acts and having the children be the perpetrators. So then on top of this data, there's 700,000 refugee children out of school in Syria due to the civil war. That is just an extremely vulnerable population that is likely already being preyed upon by ISIS and will continue to be preyed upon. And finally, there are an estimated 31,000 pregnant women within the caliphate. So one expert referred to these women as baby factories. They will be the mothers of children who are born into an ideology, not taught it, but bred to be terrorists. So then looking on to, I think, the most important part of this threat is understanding how that affects us. So, sorry, I'm still out of breath from running from the garage. So, this threatens our warfighters and our law enforcement. Abroad, it can cause psychological damage and moral injury to any soldiers forced to face children on the battlefield. Additionally, there are unnecessary deaths because our warfighters don't suspect children or are not prepared or allowed to engage them based on our rules of engagement. ISIS flagrantly disregards the laws of war and has no rules of engagement. They use children soldiers, they kill civilians, and they enslave enemies, whereas we're forced to tie our hands, as we should, and obey the rule of law, but it just makes it much harder for us to combat them. Finally, for our law enforcement officers, going back to the data, 7 of the 22 plotters, ages 15 to 25, targeted or planned to target law enforcement officers. 7 others of the 22 plan to target military officers or military installations within the United States. So clearly they'll be directly targeted. Another issue for law enforcement is TSA. This has already been uncovered as a soft spot, but children under 18 don't have to show ID to travel domestically. That will make it extremely hard for any child jihadis in the United States to be tracked as they travel domestically. Children under 12 can leave their shoes, light jackets, and headwear for screening, which can leave another soft spot, either for children who are inspired by ISIS or for parents who are utilizing their children. And finally, the increased lines and wait times at TSA security checkpoints make them extremely attractive targets. And then lastly, Latin American smuggling routes. U.S. Southern Command reported that Sunni extremists are already using those routes to cross the border into the U.S. If ISIS has not already taken advantage of this, it's likely that they will in the near future, particularly focusing on sending children who we've already identified as less suspicious. And then I think the biggest conclusion of this is the enduring legacy of the militarization of children. If we don't act quickly, there will be a generation of children that only knows violence, has only seen violence, and has only been taught violence. The Islamic State they will grow up learning the Islamic State's barbaric interpretation of Islam. And this problem will not disappear once we defeat ISIS. It will haunt us if we don't come up with a plan to counter the narrative that ISIS has taught them.